There is a particular knock on a door that a woman does not forget. It came on the 9th day of the blizzard that shut every road in this county, and it was my neighbor down the lane, standing in the snow with 2 little ones behind her, asking only if I had a spare loaf of bread because her own cupboard had gone bare 4 days before. I gave her what she needed, and more besides, because my own kitchen had not come anywhere close to bare, not on the 9th day, not on the 20th, and truth told, not even if that storm had gone on the whole winter through. The difference between her cupboard and mine was never luck, and it was never money either. It was one plain habit, kept quietly for years before that storm ever came, and I am going to show you exactly what filled my shelves that winter and why each thing had already been sitting there waiting, some of it for years already. Stay with me. My name is Miriam Hostetler, and I am 77 years old. I have kept this same farmhouse in Lancaster County for 56 years, beside the man I married when I was 21, and not one day of it with power wired in from the road. 6 children came up in this kitchen, and by now I have 23 grandchildren and 9 great-grandchildren besides, and every one of them has eaten out of a pantry that never once depended on a truck arriving on schedule. What fills my shelves? I did not learn from any book on the subject. I learned it standing beside Mommy Hannah, my husband's mother. In a root cellar, she kept fuller than most families kept their whole kitchen, back before I understood the half of why she stored things the way she did. This morning, I am going to walk you through what actually sits on my own shelves the whole year round, the plain foods that keep for years without any icebox at all, and why each one keeps as long as it does. And I am going to tell you the one thing that makes people the most upset to hear, because once you see it plain, you cannot unsee it again. Nobody teaches a young wife to keep a deep pantry anymore, not because the knowledge failed, but because there is little money in a woman who no longer needs a trip to town 3 or 4 separate times most weeks. Stay with me. A young wife 2 farms over, an English family renting the old Fisher place past the schoolhouse, believed a full chest freezer down in her cellar was the whole of her food security, packed edge to edge with meat and bread and vegetables, more food by weight, if you had weighed it, than my own cellar held that same week. When the power went out on the 2nd day of that same storm and did not come back for 8 full days, everything in that freezer thawed together into a soft, spoiled mess she had to carry out to the compost heap in the snow. Every bit of it lost inside a single week, and every dollar she had spent filling it lost right along with it. I do not say a freezer is a foolish thing to own, but a freezer that depends entirely on a wire coming in from the road is not truly stored food at all. It is only food that is waiting for the day that wire fails, and a wire fails eventually, sooner or later, for every single family that leans on one. The truth of it is, most of what actually carries a family through a hard stretch was never sitting in anybody's freezer to begin with. It was sitting quiet in jars and sacks and crocks that needed no electricity from the very first day they were put up, and that is exactly what I want to show you now. Mommy Hannah never once used a word like bacteria or mold when she taught me this, but she understood the whole of it plain as day, the way a woman understands a thing from watching it happen 1,000 times over. Anything that spoils is being eaten by something too small for your eyes to see, and that something needs water to live, same as anything else living needs water. Take the water away, and there is nothing left for it to feed on. It is the very same reason hay cures dry in the barn loft instead of rotting the way green-cut grass would within a week, and the same reason a wheel of cheese aging on the shelf in my milk house grows firm and keeps instead of turning back to spoiled milk. Dry things do not feed anything living. Wet things feed everything living, given half a chance. Air is the second thief, quieter than the first, but just as certain. A few things on my shelf need no protection from air at all, but most of what keeps for years is sealed away from it, in a jar or a crock or a sack with the air pressed clean out, because air carries in the very things that want to spoil whatever sits waiting inside. Once you understand those two plain things, water and air, you understand nearly the whole of my pantry. And a printed date stamped on a box stops mattering to you nearly as much as what your own eyes can see and your own nose can tell you, the way a woman judged her food long before anybody ever thought to print a date on it at all. Now, before I go a step further, hear this part plainly, because it matters a great deal more than anything else I am going to tell you this morning. If a jar of anything I have put up myself, meat most of all, is bulging at the lid, or hisses strange when it opens, or smells even the smallest bit wrong, that jar goes straight out to the compost heap and never anywhere near a table, no matter how many hours of a hot afternoon went into filling it. I do not taste a doubtful jar to find out for certain. Nobody in this house does, not once in 56 years at that stove, because the sickness a spoiled jar of meat can carry is one you cannot see coming and cannot smell your way clear of after the fact. A wasted jar costs you an afternoon's labor. A trusted jar that was never truly safe can cost a family a great deal more than that. Every jar and every sack in my cellar gets marked plain with the season and the year it was put up, chalked right on the lid. Oldest kept at the front where my hand reaches first, newest pushed back behind it, so that nothing sits forgotten past its good years without my knowing exactly how long it has been waiting there. You do not need anything strange or costly to keep a pantry deep, and that plain fact is exactly why nobody thinks to teach it anymore. Salt is the first thing onto my shelf every single time, because nothing living can survive inside it, and a sack kept dry in a covered tin outlasts most everything else in this house, myself very likely included. Honey comes next, and mine comes from 4 hives set along the fence past the orchard. A jar of honey does not spoil the way other sweet things spoil, because there is almost no water left inside it for anything to use. If it ever turns cloudy and hard sitting in the jar, that is only the sugar settling out, not spoiling at all, and a warm water bath brings it back clear as the day it was strained. Dried beans fill more sacks in my cellar than anything else does, because a bean carries real substance for a body working a farm through a long winter, and it keeps for years once it has dried down proper, cool and sealed away tight from the little pantry moths that will ruin a whole sack of them if you let one in. Rolled oats sit in a sealed tin right beside the beans, because a cold morning with no time to fuss still deserves something hot in a bowl, and oats dried down hard keep for years the very same as the beans beside them do. Cornmeal I grind myself from what my husband grows out past the barn, only a little at a time, because whole kernels keep for years standing in the sack. But ground meal starts losing itself to the air within a season or two, so I never grind more than what will see us through until the next grinding. And then there is my apple butter, put up every autumn from the orchard behind the milk house, cooked down slow in the big kettle for the better part of a whole day until it goes thick and dark, sealed in jars that will hold 2 years or better on a cool shelf, and it is the one thing on this entire list my grandchildren ask for, by name, the moment they come through my door. Dried herbs off my own garden round out the shelf. Sage and thyme and mint hung to dry from the rafters every August, because an herb does not spoil the way food spoils. It only loses its strength slowly over time, and a full jar of it hung dry keeps most of its worth for years past the season it was cut. Apple cider vinegar sits in a dark corner of that same cellar, made from the drops and windfalls under our own trees that are not fit to eat out of hand, but are plenty fit for pressing. A sealed jug of it barely ages at all, because it is acid enough that little wants to live in it. And one jug has carried this kitchen through a whole year of cooking, cleaning, pickling besides, and down on the bottom shelf. In a tin the grandchildren know better than any other tin in this house sits hard peppermint candy made once a year at Christmas from nothing more than sugar boiled down hard with a little peppermint oil stirred through. There is hardly a drop of water left anywhere in it once it hardens, so nothing living can ever take hold, and it sits year after year in that same tin without the smallest bit of trouble, and it has settled more than one crying great-grandchild onto my lap over the years than anything else I own. Here's the part almost nobody tells a young wife starting out, and it is the part that changes the whole thing from a wish into an actual full shelf. You do not fill a pantry like mine in a single season, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. I built this cellar one sack and one jar at a time, same as Mommy Hannah built hers before me, adding what I could spare a little at every harvest and every butchering, until one autumn I looked up and realized there was a whole year of food standing quiet on those shelves, without my ever once setting out to do it all at once. The step most young wives skip entirely is not the filling of the shelf, it is the walking of it. Twice every year, once after the spring planting and once after the fall butchering, I walk the whole cellar shelf by shelf and move the oldest jars and sacks to the front where my hand reaches them first, checking each one plain with my own eyes as I go. A woman who fills her cellar once and never looks at it again will find half of it gone soft or gone stale the one winter she finally needs it most. A woman who walks her own shelf twice a year, using the oldest first and restocking a little behind it each time, never runs out and never wastes a jar either. And that, dear, is the whole of the secret, plain as anything. That is how mine has stayed full for 56 years without my ever once feeling the weight of doing it all at once. A little added after every harvest, a little drawn from the front every week, and the shelf simply stays deep on its own, the way a good spring stays full, without a soul standing over it filling a bucket by hand. Now, I will be honest with you, the way I mean to be honest at my own table every single time. A deep pantry is not a fresh garden, and it will never taste quite the same as a tomato pulled warm off the vine in July. What sits in these jars is good, sound food, but it is not a replacement for what grows fresh. It is only a bridge across the months when nothing at all is growing, and none of it keeps forever, no matter what anybody tries to tell you. Even salt can ruin if damp finds its way in, and even honey can spoil if water gets into the jar somehow. Every single thing on my shelf still gets looked at, smelled, and judged with my own good sense before it goes anywhere near a pot, no matter how many years the chalk mark on the lid claims it has kept. This is a habit for feeding a family well, dear, not a trick that lets a woman stop paying attention. I think often about why a full cellar came to feel like something unusual, almost strange, instead of the ordinary thing it once was. Mommy Hannah's whole generation never once called themselves careful or prepared for hard times. A full cellar was simply what a decent household kept. No more remarkable to them than a swept floor or a mended fence line, and nobody thought to praise a woman for either one. Nobody sat down one day and decided the world ought to forget how to keep a deep pantry. It happened slow and quiet, the same way most plain, good knowledge tends to slip away from a family. A store opened up on nearly every corner, promising a full shelf any day of the year a body wanted one, and so fewer mothers ever bothered teaching a daughter how the old way was properly done. There is no quiet magic in what sits in my cellar, and I will not pretend otherwise. It is no miracle, only sense. The same plain sense my husband's mother carried her whole life through without ever once calling it anything special. A woman who keeps a full shelf built up slow over the seasons needs no truck to arrive on schedule and no wire from the road to keep her own family fed clean through a hard stretch of weather. I still think of that knock on my door some winters back and of how near a thing it was for that young mother and her two little ones. She keeps her own pantry properly now, dated and rotated same as mine, and she has never once had to knock on a neighbor's door again in the years since. Here, then, is the one small thing I would have you do this week. Choose just one item from everything I have shown you this morning, a sack of beans, a jar of honey, a tin of salt, and store it properly, dry and sealed and marked plain with the date you put it away. Then come down to the comments and tell me two things. First, which one you started with. And second, how many days your own kitchen could truly feed your family right now if the store on the corner closed its doors and did not open again for a month. I read every single one of them, and they teach me a great deal about how other women are keeping their own homes these days. And the next time I sit with you, I want to show you which of my own canned goods are truly worth the shelf space and which ones quietly waste a jar, and the plain way I have learned to tell one from the other just by looking. The good Lord keep you. Come back and see me soon. Come back and see me soon.